Home Secretary, thank you for speaking to LBC. Why are these changes suddenly so necessary now?
We need this emergency legislation, which today has passed through the Commons stages, so just the House of Commons, because as we saw in December last year and just 2 weekends ago in Streatham, where we have had individuals that have been convicted for terrorist offences, they were released from prison early under the automatic early release scheme, where they had no contact with a parole board, so no engagement whatsoever, and they were then released from prison. And once they were released from prison, they went on to commit offences, cause harm, kill 2 people, shamefully as we saw in the London Bridge attack. And as we saw 2 weeks ago in Streatham, we saw injuries through the actions of Sudesh Aman. That is what we want to stop. We want to stop terrorist offenders from leaving prison early and also leaving prison without any engagement with a parole board. So this legislation will change that, stop the automatic early release of these offenders, terrorist offenders, people that have committed very serious and significant crimes. And we are doing this, of course, to put the protection of the British public first and foremost.
Is there a sense that this could have been done 6 months ago before some of these people were released? Why is the government suddenly reacting now after the events?
Well, look, I think there are a number of steps, obviously, that we can now take. We have the ability to legislate in the House of Commons. You know, it's a different situation. Even back in December, when Fishmongers Hall happened, I'll be very candid. I mean, I had had discussions with the Prime Minister and the Lord Chancellor and absolutely spelt out that this type of situation was totally unacceptable. Our first duty is to protect the public. But, of course, in December, we were in a general election campaign, and this is now the earliest opportunity that we have had to take very clear and decisive action, which is exactly what we are doing. And the purpose of this legislation is exactly that. It is to put the British public's protection first, make sure that terrorist offenders can no longer leave prison early under this auto-release scheme, but also ensure that obviously we now have a parole board situation where every individual, every terrorist offender will go through a parole board process.
When you say it's the first opportunity you had, are you suggesting that this would only get through Parliament with a majority like you've now got and wouldn't have done before the general election?
No, because don't forget, of course, this was, I've been Home Secretary just since the summer period last year, but it was the Fishmongers Hall issue, the incident there, where yet again we saw with Usman Khan, an individual that had been released from prison early, not gone through a parole board, and of course he went on to commit offences leading to 2 tragic murders. Obviously there are police investigations and everything else that are following, but we are now in government, and since the election this is our opportunity to legislate. We're absolutely doing that. I'll be quite candid, we are unapologetic as a government when it comes to taking action to protect the public, and absolutely when it comes to terrorist offenders leaving prison early, it's an unacceptable situation. No one can say that is an acceptable situation, and this legislation absolutely deals with this cohort of individuals that were sentenced in the way in which they were, where they could leave prison early and obviously not go through a parole board setup, and that is what we've got to change, and that's what we're doing.
Has the Attorney-General assured the Cabinet that these changes are fully legal?
Well, of course, as with all legislation, everything with regards to the drafting of this legislation, the work that has taken place, goes across government. So through our law offices, naturally, but also in conjunction with the Ministry of Justice and the Home Office as well. We have a significant team of people who work on terrorist offences and obviously the work that we do to de-radicalise and prevent terrorist offences. So this is a cross-government effort, and this legislation absolutely will address what it needs to address, this issue where we end this early automatic release and we have a parole board mechanism so that these individuals are effectively not released from prison early, but also go through a parole board process.
Just to be fully clear, the Attorney-General has advised you and the Cabinet that he is confident these changes meet the law.
These changes have gone through all the appropriate processes that you would expect that the Ministry of Justice, also in addition with the Law Commissioner and law officers, absolutely. And in fact, Robert Buckland, the Lord Chancellor, made that very clear today on the floor of the House.
Let me just read a bit of the European Convention on Human Rights to you, which the UK is obviously part of. It says that there should not be a heavier penalty imposed than the one that was applicable at the time the criminal offence was committed. These changes don't meet that, do they?
Well, I think you'll find with this legislation, the Lord Chancellor could not have been clearer today if you'd listened to him on the floor of the House, and I was there with him, that this legislation absolutely does what it needs to do in terms of protecting the public and ensuring, of course, that the individuals in question are serving their sentence. You know, these are particular individuals who have committed very specific offences, and of course they have gone through the sentencing process, but also their offences have been considered fully. And our job right now as legislators is to bring in the right kind of changes that can protect the public from the type of offences that these individuals have been perpetrating before they were sentenced, but also to ensure that we de-risk the British public from being harmed in any way whatsoever.
Just in a word, you're confident that these changes are in no way a breach of the European Convention on Human Rights?
Absolutely. We are bringing in legislation, and today, let me make this very clear, the legislation has passed all stages in the House of Commons. The legislation has been drafted in conjunction across government departments with the law officers in absolutely the right way. And, you know, this is absolutely the right approach that we need to take to protect the British public. Our job and duty as a government is to protect the British public, and that is effectively what we're doing through this emergency legislation.
And they will be implemented, whatever the circumstances, whatever legal challenges. You and the Prime Minister are completely committed to these changes.
We are absolutely committed to these changes, hence the reason why we have put forward this emergency legislation. These changes are essential if we are to keep the public safe.
Whatever the circumstances.
Well, this is about keeping the public safe, and as you've heard me say this several times, this is legislation that has been drafted across government in conjunction, obviously, with legal advice through our law officers and through the Ministry of Justice. So, absolutely, this is legislation that will keep the public safe.
And you're confident if those legal challenges do come, there's not a threat that there's going to be overturned?
We are adamant that we need to bring this legislation in. It is the right thing to do to protect the British public.
Can I just move on to the deportation of foreign national offenders to Jamaica? Do you see any difference between people who came here as young children and went on to commit crimes and people who came here as adults and did so?
Well, I think the first thing that I would say, I'm unapologetic about protecting the British public. People that have been convicted of serious offences, and when I say serious offences, this includes manslaughter, this includes rape, this includes sexual offences against children, domestic violence, domestic abuse, just the most abhorrent crimes. It is right that we deport individuals under the laws that we have, the statutes in Parliament, and that is effectively what we are doing.
What do you make of the courts effectively saying you acted unlawfully in this? About half the people on that plane were banned from being deported. What was your response to that?
Well, I think first of all, I have acted lawfully in accordance with the 2007 Act with regards to foreign national offenders. Let's be very clear about this. That is an act of Parliament, that is legislation that makes it abundantly clear that a government, a Home Secretary, absolutely should, within the law, which is exactly the approach we've taken, should deport foreign national offenders that have served a sentence of 12 months or more, particularly for these serious levels of crimes. And let me just say something else. For the individuals we are speaking about, the whole number of the years of sentences that they were serving was in excess of 300 years. That is the level of the severity of their crime and the criminality here. Now, when it comes to the courts, it is disappointing, basically, that they have stopped the British government from deporting people that are a threat to the British public and have, as I've said already, committed the most serious offences against other people. I think the courts as well should be very mindful of the fact that, you know, the reason why they've taken this particular approach was with regards to mobile phone access or SIM card access, not even mobile phone access. And there's plenty of access to landlines and internet and other forms of communications.
You're saying the Court of Appeal got it wrong?
I'm saying they have not taken into consideration the 2007 Act, but also the extent of criminality of the individuals and the absolute issue and trauma around the victims of these awful crimes. Now, the Court of Appeal intervened very late on. I personally think they've gone out of their way to block this deportation, deporting foreign national offenders, people that have created and generated a great deal of harm with the offences that they've undertaken. I think they themselves, will be challenging this. Obviously, we'll be in the courts challenging this. Obviously, we will do that robustly. But I think, personally, in the eyes of the British public, they will be questioning the actions that have been undertaken when they can see that the government was acting certainly within the law of the 2007 legislation.
When you say they went out their way, you're suggesting there was some sort of political motivation behind this?
Well, it's quite clear that there were campaigns around this. There were political campaigns, and obviously there are law firms that, focus on putting judicial reviews together. And let's be quite clear about this. These are law firms that obviously have access to public funds as well, legal aid on behalf of the individuals that they are representing. Now, the fact is, according to the 2007 Act, we are absolutely, the government is there to deport foreign national offenders. That is the legislation. I was acting within the Act, acting within the law. I think, quite frankly, the British public will feel as frustrated and as aghast as I do that our hands have been tied when it comes to deporting some incredibly serious, violent foreign national offenders out of our country.
Do you think it's wrong that those firms have access to legal aid, public funding?
Well, I think, quite frankly, these areas, are highly questionable. When it comes to enabling the government to get on and do what it needs to do, I think, quite frankly, it's really... I think the British public, again, will find it very strange that there are law firms behaving in this way, and there are campaigners, basically, including the Labour Party, campaigning to keep foreign national offenders, people that have caused great harm to the victims of their crime, people that are a threat to the safety and security of the British public. I think the public will think it's just incredibly strange that there are campaigners, including the Labour Party, that want to support these individuals.
Is there a prospect of the government looking at withdrawing legal aid potentially from these offenders?
I'm not speculating on any of this right now. All I'd say is that, we are committed to doing everything to keep the British public safe, and that equally applies to the deportation of foreign national offenders.
Just lastly on this, if the government's view is that people who have committed crimes abroad should be sent back to their home country, will we be repatriating people who went to join ISIS who are British citizens?
Well, let me first of all just say I'm speaking about foreign national offenders. So obviously there is legislation specific to foreign national offenders. And in fact, in the Conservative Party manifesto in the general election, we were very clear about foreign national offenders, and we will bring a bill forward in Parliament as well to ensure that we absolutely make sure we do the right thing and deport foreign national offenders. Now, when it comes to terrorist suspects, individuals that obviously have been involved in terrorist acts and, joining terrorist organisations effectively in Syria and supporting Daesh and, fighting. That is absolutely right that we obviously deal with those individuals, but in a different way. We've got other pieces of legislation. We've got a counter-terrorism bill coming forward. We've got more work coming on sentencing, where we will be bringing 14 years as a minimum sentence for those individuals that are obviously complicit when it comes to terrorist activities. And obviously there is much more legislation to come in this space. And in fact, I announced the counter-terrorism bill something like 3 weeks ago, and the clear measures that we'll be undertaking.
I guess I'm just getting at, if the view is that other countries should take back their nationals that commit crimes abroad, surely that applies to the UK too.
Well, look, we're doing a lot of work, and I'm not going to publicly discuss the type of work that we're doing. This is a highly sensitive area, and it is right that we carry on working with our international allies and partners on how, when it comes to foreign terrorist fighters, how we all deal with this issue.
Home Secretary, just lastly, Cabinet reshuffle tomorrow. Are you confident this time tomorrow you'll still be in your current job?
That's a decision for the Prime Minister.
Do you want to be?
That is a decision for the Prime Minister.